Hey guys, welcome to week 24 of Motivation and Emotion. It's not crazy hard week, but it is definitely a tough one with a lot of theories, a lot of moving parts. So please make sure you're taking the time to really make sure you get all the big points. So let's get to it. Here we go. Now, when we are talking this week, we're dealing with motivation. Now, motivation is the process by which activities are started, directed, and continued so that physical or psychological needs or wants are met. So it is the decision to do things, it's the decision to act, it's the motivation, it is the reason why you do the things you do. Now, a lot of us do things based on extrinsic motivation, or when you do something because leads to an outcome that is separate from the external to the person. So you clean your room because it makes your mom stop yelling at you. You do well at school so you can get into a good college that your parents want you to get into. You work really hard at practice so your coach doesn't yell at you. Those types of things. That's extrinsic or external to the body. Now, instinct approaches. Our instincts are biologically determined or innate patterns of behavior that exist in both animals and people. Now, animals, it's easier to do. For instance, like salmon, they swim upriver to get to their spawning ground, which they were born into. That's an instinct. Our instincts are when we first meet people, we have a reaction to people. That would be an instinct. Now, when we look at instinct approaches, what we are thinking is an approach to motivation that assumes people are governed by their instincts similar to those of animals. So instinct approach is not actually one of the more popular of our approaches. However, it's the belief that everything you do is based on your thoughts, your ideas, your processes on how things should work and how things do work. So everything is like by the gut. You like someone because the first time you met them, it worked out well. You are doing something because, you think it's the right thing to do without really thinking about it, but your instinct. Okay? Now, one of the biggest aspects of motivation is the drive reduction theory. Now, a need is a requirement of some material, such as food or water, that is essential for survival. A need means if you don't have it, you're going to die. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So water, food, all those different types are needs. Now, when we have a need, we also have a drive. Now, a drive is a psychological tension and physical arousal arising where there is a need that motivates the organism to act in order to fulfill the need and reduce the tension. What that means is that when you're hungry, you will do whatever it takes to stop that hunger pain. When you're thirsty, you'll do whatever it takes to get a drink. When you are physically uncomfortable, you will do whatever it takes in order to fulfill or get rid of that tension. So drive reduction theory is the approach to motivation that assumes behavior arises from the physiological needs that cause internal drives to push an organism to satisfy. So in drive reduction theory is that we do things because we don't want to have that feeling of guilt. We don't want to have that feeling of hunger. We don't want to feel that feeling of cold. Okay, we want to be comfortable. All those things motivate us. So some people are literally motivated to go to work every day so they can put groceries on the table to feed their family. That would be drive reduction. Where you have a need of food and your drive is you need to make sure that you have a constant income of money in order to buy food, put a roof over your heads as a major foundation. Now, when we talk about drive reduction, it's not just about food or water because our lives are way more complicated than that. So we also have primary drives, which is your food, your water, and we also have acquired or secondary drives. Some people are really motivated by material things. So getting a new car, having the newest technology, that they work crazy hours. My brother is one of these people. He loves fancy vacations. So he works crazy hours. He works probably like 60, 70 hours a week just to go on really nice vacations because that's what motivates him. So he goes well out of his way. He has a need of wonderful vacations, so he goes out of his way to accomplish that. Now, when we have homeostasis, it's when everything is equal. The tendency of the body to maintain a steady state. Okay, it is when everything is about the same, where you don't feel uncomfortable. You're completely content. You're not hungry. You're not thirsty. You're not cold. You have everything. You're completely satisfied. Now, when we deal with motivation, we have to understand that there are 3 types of needs. Need for achievement, which you need to know, and ACH, which is a need that involves a strong desire to succeed in attaining goals, not only realistic ones, but also challenging ones. So some of us have really big goals for ourselves. Like some people, one of my students has said they want to be a judge for the state of Florida. Okay, that's a huge goal that takes a long time to earn. That would be a need for achievement. When I was younger, I wanted to be a state senator and go to Washington, D.C. and represent whatever state I was in. I thought that would be a really cool thing to do. Need of achievement, attaining these incredibly high goals. Need of affiliation is the need for friendly social interactions and relationships with others. Some people really thrive off being connected. There's a lot of you who are completely addicted to your social media. Whether it's your Snapchat, your Instagram, whatever else you people are on, you have to have notifications. You need to constantly get in that text and be in those group chats with your friends because that makes you feel connected and makes you feel like you're a part of things. That would be need of affiliation. When you feel bad, when you haven't gotten a notification, you haven't gotten a million text messages from your friends, that would be, if you desire that type of following, that would be need for achievement. And then finally, the need for power is the need to have control over influence. My brother is a huge person of this. He likes to be an authority figure. He wants to move up the ranks in order to have more authority. Need for power for people who want really powerful jobs and be respected. Now, all 3 of these, every single person has one that they identify most with. I am a need for achievement person. I have certain goals I have for myself, and I will accomplish those goals. Obviously, I have to be realistic, but overall, I'm pretty driven as a person. However, need of affiliation is probably my weakest. Power is definitely pretty low. So each of you have one that you are predominantly. All of us want to be loved and cared for. All of us want to feel like they're in control of some things, but please keep in mind that each of you have one that you're specifically more powerful. Now that we've gone through our instincts, now we're going to go through our arousal. Now, arousal is dealing with stimulus motives, which is a motive that appears to be unlearned but causes an increase in stimulation, such as curiosity. Stimulus motive is when something causes a follow-up, a requirement. Something that you can't just leave alone. You know how when someone says something and you just can't help it, you have to ask another question or get more information? That would be stimulus motive. An example of this is your arousal theory, which is a theory of motivation in which people are said to have an optimal, best or ideal level of tension that they seek to maintain by increasing or decreasing stimulation. So that essentially, with arousal theory, there's a sweet spot. Okay? What that means is that if you aren't invested in something, you don't care. Like, I do not care about fantasy football. I literally could care less. So if the world was burning and fantasy football was the cure, I still would say I don't care about fantasy football. Okay, so the level of tension I have is absolutely 0, or I'm absolutely raging. There's no sweet spot where I can deal with it like a rational human being. I literally shut down. I hate it that much. Okay, so when we deal with arousal theory, it's a tension that seeks to maintain or increasing or decreasing stimulation. We can only deal so much in order to happily cope with things. Now, when we deal with arousal approach, we have the Yerkes-Dodson law. Now, the Yerkes-Dodson law is a law, which means it's not a theory, which means it's been proven scientifically. Now, the Yerkes-Dodson law states that performance is related to arousal. Moderate levels of arousal lead to better performances than levels of arousal that are too high or too low. What that means is easy tasks are harder to do. Like, for instance, going to go check the mail. I don't know about you, but I am like drag my feet checking the mailbox. I hate checking the mailbox. Whether it's not hard. Nope, not hard. Another thing would be scooping the litter box. Not hard. I hate it so much that it literally is painful for me. Now, super difficult tasks are very, very challenging as well and lead to very quickly say, screw it, I don't care. Okay, when I get really, really frustrated with something I'm not good at, I shut down and cry, to be quite honest. So Yerkes Dodson law says that if you have a very hard task, you need to have a low stress environment. So say, for instance, you were bullying me into doing a calculus problem. If I was doing it in a low-key environment where people were being really supportive and helping, I could sit there and bear through it, I think. I don't know. I probably would cry a little bit. However, if you put me in an environment where you just sat there and stared at me and kept saying, oh my God, can you really not figure this out? Oh my God, are you an idiot? I would literally start crying immediately because I hate feeling like a moron, as does everyone. So Yerkes Dodson law says there's a sweet spot that with the perfect amount of stress, things get done quickly. Now, some people require more arousal than others. What that means is some people require more adrenaline or more excitement than other people. For instance, I am not a sensation seeker or a person who needs more arousal than the average person. I like books. I like sitting at home. I like making dinner. I like drinking wine. Having a low-key life. That's what I like. Okay? I am not someone who enjoys roller coasters. I am not someone who would ever think about jumping out of a plane. That is not for me. People who think like roller coasters and jumping out of a plane and doing all those wild and crazy things, they're just sensation seekers, which means they don't have high enough arousal. Now, here's arousal and performance. Okay, the harder the task, the more difficult the task, the level of arousal should be lower. Okay, so incentive approach. Now, incentives are things that attract people to lure people into action. So if I say, if you do this, you'll get $50, that's going to get people to do something more likely. Incentive approaches are theories of motivation in which behavior is explained as a response to the external stimulus and rewarding principles. Okay, so incentive approaches says that people's responses to a stimulus, whether if you get all A's in high school, I'll get you a car, that would be an incentive approach. If you're motivated by a car, that would work. If you're not motivated by a car, it's not going to work. So it just kind of depends. Now, expectancy value theory is an incentive theory that assumes the actions of humans cannot be predicted fully or understood without understanding the beliefs, values, and importance that a person attaches to those beliefs and values at any given time. When we deal with expectancy value theory, what we're talking about actually is you can't understand or predict a person's behavior until you get to know them well enough. Like when you look at someone who has a lot of really nice things, you might just assume, oh, they're really like material based and they don't really care about anything else. Well, in fact, it might be completely opposite. So expectancy value theory is that you can't predict behavior until you know that person. And I think that's really true if you really think about it. Because you know your good friends really, really well, you may be able to kind of guess what their behavioral responses are to certain issues. However, people you don't know well, you may not be able to respond. Like who is going to be, out of option A or B, who is going to be the most generous? If you don't know these people, you won't know. Now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is one of the biggest aspects of motivation and emotion 1. Now, Maslow is all about self-actualization, which is the point that is seldom reached or very rarely met, where people have sufficiently satisfied the lower needs and achieved their full human potential. What that means is you are in the right spot at the right time with the right people. Everything in your life has totally come together and is fit together perfectly. Makes a lot of sense. It doesn't happen often, sadly. Now, you may never reach self-actualization, which is actually probably pretty true, no offense. However, you may experience peak experiences where for a moment or a day of your life, you may experience self-actualization where you feel like you know who you are. You're right at the right place at the right time. It's not a forever feeling. However, it is one that does exist, and that's called a peak experience. So what is Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Now, you do need to know all of them in order. Now, when we talk about Maslow, you have to start at the bottom. The base of the pyramid is what carries all the weight. Once you fulfill the bottom tier, then you go up to the next tier. You don't start at transcendence or self-actualization. That's after you've done the work of the others. So at the very bottom, you have the physiological needs. So a person can't survive unless they satisfy hunger, thirst, and fatigue. If you don't eat, drink, and sleep, you die. Makes sense. You have to satisfy those needs before you can worry about anything else. Now, safety needs are feel secure and safe and out of danger. If you feel unsafe, there's nothing you can focus on except for your safety. So, once you satisfied food, thirst, fatigue, then you have to deal with safety. Do you feel safe where you are? Do you feel safe in what you're doing? Do you feel safe in whatever environment you're in? If you don't feel safe, that's what you focus on finding a safe place to be, finding a place of security. That's what you focus on. You can't focus on anything else. Once you have achieved this safety, you then deal with belongingness, feeling connected to the community, feeling connected to your family, whatever it requires. So once you've satisfied physiological and safety needs, then you focus on being accepted and belonging. Every person on the planet wants to belong. Whether they reject it later because of a certain thing that happens, that's fine. But we are social animals who all want to belong. So once you satisfy the physiological, the safety, and the belongingness, now you're at esteem. And this is where you want to feel competent, gain approval, and recognition. What that means is you want to feel like an independent and respected individual. You don't want to be seen as some generic thing. You want to be seen as a unique individual who can accomplish things. And that's esteem. Typically, most people experience this one through middle school, where you start seeing yourself as an independent, you start seeing your strengths and your weaknesses, stuff like that. In high school, you're really working through your cognitive needs to know and to understand and to explore when you actually start pursuing questions and trying to getting more information. Now, keep in mind, just because you go from one tier to the next does not mean everyone makes it to the next tier. Between esteem and cognitive needs, we start seeing a huge drop-off. Most people reach esteem, that they feel confident in what they do. Good portion meet cognitive needs. Very few people meet aesthetic needs. Even fewer people meet self-actualization. And then almost no one meets transcendence. Okay, so the higher you go, the less people get it, obviously. Look at how small it gets. So cognitive needs is to know, to understand, to explore. It's when you start asking bigger questions, when you start asking more information, you're going out of your way to learn more. An example of this would be, watching documentaries, would be reading lots of books, and you just have this quest for knowledge. That's cognitive needs. Now your next step, which most people get to, aesthetic needs, is where we really start seeing a huge drop-off. Now aesthetic needs are appreciating like the finer things of culture, like symmetry, order, beauty, fine art, wine, all of those different types of things. Not everyone gets there, but some people do. Now, finally, you also have self-actualization, which is when you find self-fulfillment and realize one's own potential. This is when you have figured out who you are as a person and you are totally in sync with who you are. You're in the right place at the right time. You're doing the right things. All of those types of things kind of come together in one big way. And then finally, you have transcendence. Now, transcendence is when you help other people reach self-fulfillment and self-actualization. Now, in transcendence, the best example I can kind of come up with is going to be your Oprah. Oprah goes out of her way to help people learn more about themselves and to become better people. So that would be an example of transcendence. Self-actualization is people who are very confident in themselves, who appreciate themselves, who know themselves, and try to do well by others. Ellen, Mother Teresa would be stuff like that. All right. Our next big theory is self-determination theory. Now, self-determination theory is a theory of human motivation in which the social context of an action has an effect on the type of motivation existing for that action. What that means is how society sees something dictates whether it's an important or not important. So for instance, in our society, having cars and nice cars are important. So some people are motivated just to own expensive cars. My husband would be one of them. Okay? That would be self-determination theory. However, in our society, it's not very common for people to want to read all of the classics. So, with that being said, anyone who's really motivated to read the top 100 books of all time is not very known and not very common. So society dictates our motivation. Most of you are not saying, oh my God, I can't wait to read all 100 of the classic books. Well, most of you would say, oh, hey, I really want a new car, self-determination. Now, when we deal with self-motivation, we're dealing with our intrinsic motivation. What matters to us? Some people having a really nice new car. Some people reading all of the top 100. Those are all intrinsic things that you do for you. For instance, you, in your head, you learned that all princes go to Princeton. So you've decided you wanted to go to Princeton University. If you have always dreamed of becoming an astronaut, so you really focus on math and science courses and you're constantly trying to improve in order to be, hopefully one day be an astronaut. Those are intrinsic motivation. You do it for you. Now, when we also talk about motivation, we have to deal with hunger, and we have to deal with how our body responds to things. Now, hunger is based on insulin, and insulin is secreted by the pancreas to control the levels of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates in the body by reducing the levels of glucose in the bloodstream. Now, glucose is what kind of breaks down things. Now, when we talk about clearly I've never done this before. Another one is glucogens, which are hormones that are secreted by the pancreas and controls the level of fats and proteins and increasing. Now, when we talk about insulin and glucogens, we're talking about how the body kind of responds. When we have a lot of fats and proteins, we use and inject insulin into our bloodstream. When we have low levels of fats and proteins, we use glucogens to increase the levels of glucose in the bloodstream. Now, hunger, your weight set point is a particular level of weight that the body tries to maintain. Each of us have a certain weight that our body is very comfortable with. For instance, you have a bad weekend and you kind of eat everything. You are a little heavier at the beginning of the week, but by the end of the week, your weight kind of balances out. That is weight set. You go on a really strict diet for a week or two, and then you go back to normal, and then you put all your weight back on. Your body likes maintaining a certain weight because it's already done all the chemistry. If you lose a lot of weight or gain a lot of weight, it requires a lot of chemistry of your body to figure out the new levels, and that's a lot of work. So I'd rather maintain the same. Now, basal metabolic rate is the rate in which the body burns energy when the organism is resting. This is your resting calorie count burning. The higher it is, the thinner you're going to be because it requires more. Men have a higher one than women because men's muscles are larger. They burn about 45 more calories an hour than women do. So homeostasis is when your body maintains balance in the body's physical states. For example, it shows the increased hunger, state of imbalance, prompts a person to eat. Eating increases the level of glucose, the blood sugar, causing the feelings of hunger to reduce. After a period of without eating, the glucose levels become low enough to stimulate the hunger drive once again, and the entire cycle is repeated. Okay? Now, hunger is also dictated by social cues. When it's noon, I don't care who you are, you're kind of like, oh, I could eat. Okay, cultural customs. Most of us eat around 6 or 7 at night. Obviously, with sports and stuff, it's a little trickier for you guys. But around 6 or 7, you're kind of like, oh, okay, I'm ready to eat. Having people all together. For instance, I'm from an Irish-Italian family. When there's more than 3 of us in a room, we're eating. We just can't help it. Like, someone's pulling out snacks, someone's making something, we just can't help it. Food preferences are also based on culture. They're also based on social cues. And we also have the use of food as a comfort device. I mean, I was taught this by my parents, my mom specifically, and McCrae does not have this. So McCrae doesn't need junk food. I feel like I have to have junk food because when I'm happy, I want it because I'm celebrating, and when I'm sad, I need it because I'm sad. And finally, some people respond to the anticipation of eating by producing an insulin response, increasing the risk of obesity. Your obese people typically have a higher insulin release, which is going to lead to diabetes. Now, when we talk about eating problems, we have the issue of obesity, and we have the issue of anorexia, and the issue of bulimia. All of these you've heard throughout your experiences. Now, obesity is a condition in which the body weight of a person is 20% or more over the ideal body weight. And they vary between cultures and stuff what the ideal weight is. Anorexia nervosa is a condition in which the person reduces eating to the point where the body loses 15% below the ideal. Now, anorexia is when you refuse to eat. And bulimia is a condition in which a person develops a cycle of binging or overeating enormous amounts of food in one sitting and then purging or deliberately vomiting after eating. So they eat and then throw it up. It is a massive issue in our society still even to this day. And it's actually becoming more common for men, actually, which is really sad as well. One of the big experiments from Motivation and Emotion is looking at laboratory rats. This rat reached a high level of obesity because of the ventromedial hypothalamus has been manipulated and damaged, and the rat no longer receives signals of being satisfied. So he continues to eat, and eventually he will die because his stomach explodes. So the ventromedial hypothalamus regulates your hunger. And possible signs of eating disorder: dramatic weight loss, obsession with calories, hiding food in strange places, hair loss, pale skin, bruised or calloused knuckles, frequent trips to the bathroom, obsession with continuous exercise, wearing baggy clothes, reading books about weight loss and eating disorders, complaints of often feeling cold. All of these are signs that you have seen or you've heard about, I assume. Now, when we have eating problems, one of the issues is a hormone called leptin. Now, leptin is released into the bloodstream, and it signals the hypothalamus has had enough food and reduces the appetite while increasing the feeling of being full. Now, if your leptin is weak or not functioning properly, you'll most likely be obese. If your leptin is overacting, you'll be incredibly thin, because you're just never hungry. It's just biologically, you just don't have that much. One of my good friends growing up, she had an overactive leptin, and her mom kind of had to force her to eat. It wasn't anorexia, nothing. She was like that since the day she was born. It wasn't a social image thing. She was just teeny tiny because her leptin was overactive. And they actually tried with drugs to decrease the leptin, and it never really worked. So that is a big issue. Genetics play a part in anorexia and bulimia, as well as insensitivity to leptin. Obesity: if you come from obese parents, you're more likely to be obese, and you're more likely to have issues with your weight, both positive in the gaining and the negative as in your anorexia and bulimia. Whether you obsess about your weight so you don't gain weight, so you go to the extremes, or you easily gain weight. It just depends. All right, guys. Well, that is the end of Motivation and Emotion 1. I hope you have a great week, and let me know if there's anything I can do. Have a great week.